A new CBS News poll finds the 2020 race is tightening. Our CBS News Battleground Tracker focused on the 18 early caucus and primary contests. It starts with Iowa and goes all the way to Super Tuesday. Frontrunner Joe Biden is holding his lead in these states. The former vice president has 25% of voter support, followed by Senator Elizabeth Warren with 20%. Senators Kamala Harris and Bernie Sanders are each right behind. The second tier has Mayor Pete Buttigieg polling at 6%. He's followed by former Congressman Beto O'Rourke and former Housing Secretary Julian Castro. The rest of the candidates are polling at just 1% or less. That puts them in the third and final tier. Ed O'Keefe joins me now. So, Ed, Joe Biden is still the first choice for Democratic voters across the 18 expected primary and caucus states. When it comes to these top-tier candidates, how did the latest poll results change from last month?
Well, the former vice president's lead has shrunk, and two other women senators have now jumped in right behind him, Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren, who've managed to nudge Bernie Sanders back to fourth place. And it's notable that that now seems to be happening because both women have enjoyed momentum out on the campaign trail in recent weeks for a variety of reasons. And this polling is now bearing that enthusiasm out.
Well, an interesting poll result showed Kamala Harris coming out on top as the candidate who is perceived to be, quote, the most strong. In a poll that asked which candidate would fight a lot for people like you, Warren, Harris, and Sanders all did better than Joe Biden. What's behind those results?
I think what is behind it, Elaine, is essentially the elbow grease that those lesser-known top-tier candidates have been putting into the race is paying off. Voters are beginning to notice. Biden has been the front-runner, remains the front-runner. Probably to many voters right now is an insurance policy. But it signals that perhaps many of them are open to being convinced by somebody else. Harris gets a lot of credit, of course, for her debate performance last month. Warren has spent months putting out reams of detailed policy proposals on a host of issues. Voters in the Democratic primary certainly enjoy that. And Sanders, of course, maintains a healthy standing, if only because he talks so much about health care, which is a top issue of concern to Democratic voters.
Well, Ed, can you tell us what makes the CBS News Battleground Tracker different compared to other polls that are out there?
First of all, we're asking 8,000 people in the first 18 states that vote up through Super Tuesday next March 6th how they feel about this. That's a sizable pool. But the second is that our pollsters essentially take the data, take some various voter models, and are able to game out what potentially is the distribution of delegates. Because after all, in about 11 and a half months, when Democrats meet in Milwaukee for the convention, candidates are going to need delegates in order to win the nomination. Right now, the estimate is that Biden maintains a lead, but it's down by about 200 delegates from last month, followed by Warren, Sanders, and Harris. Beto O'Rourke and Amy Klobuchar managed to get a few delegates because they're doing well enough in their home states of Texas and Minnesota that they would conceivably, if this estimate holds, go to the convention with at least a handful of delegates. So remember, just like in the general election, the Electoral College trumps the popular vote. In a primary, the delegate count trumps the raw vote total. And if you get at least 15% in some of these states, in all of these states, you will get at least some delegates to the convention.
Yes, really important context to keep in mind as we move forward. And I also want to ask you about some stories that are in the political headlines today. Mayor Pete Buttigieg was in the spotlight on Monday after it was reported that an interview the mayor did with a popular country music radio host in Nashville was not allowed to air. Tell us more about that story, and why was his interview cut from the show?
As we understand it, Elaine, it was nothing that he said or did in the interview. It was the owner of the radio show, in essence. Cumulus Media, which owns radio stations across the country, essentially reminded the host of the program that the FCC's equal time rule might trip him up and force him to talk to all of the candidates. He specifically wanted to talk to Buttigieg because of how he's selling himself to voters and the fact that he, like the radio host, is an openly gay man. Instead, the interview was posted on the host's SoundCloud account, and Cumulus says, we're just sticking by that policy that essentially says if you're going to interview one politician, you're going to have to interview their competition. And for a country music station that doesn't focus on politics too often, it's perhaps understandable that's why they took that step.
Interesting. All right, Ed O'Keefe for us. Ed, thank you.
Take care.